Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Michael Ha. It's a pleasure to be able to sit here and speak with all of you today. And I will be going over the often feared and dreaded section of your application process, which is the interview. So let's say that you have managed to finish off your GCSE grades, you've submitted your application, you've done your UK your BMAT, you've got your references in, and you are trundling along this process, and you have luckily managed to get an interview. So now what? What do you do? And so I will basically guide you through this process, but first I'll give you a bit of a background about myself. And so I am a Cambridge alumni. I used to be a Cambridge supervisor and an interviewer myself. And so here you're going to get a couple of like very cheesy photos of me, so kind of bear with. And so this is me at my current job now. I'm actually based out in America. I'm on the East Coast in Baltimore, working at University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins, if anyone knows. And I'm currently doing a plastic surgery research fellowship. But following my degree, I did an academic placement for F1 and F2, specializing in medical education. I also was a clinical supervisor and interview panelist for the University of Cambridge, and I spent probably about 7 years, 8 years of my time in the UK working with the Graduate Access and Admissions Office at both St. John's College as well people into Cambridge, getting people into medicine. I was also a student as well. So I graduated 2018 from St. John's College. I did both of my preclinical and clinical medicine there, which I think is now a standard across the board. And my intercalation was in art history, because why not? But going back even further, this is a horrendous photo of me back when I was in your position. And so me being 17 years old and applying for Cambridge. And I was born and raised in Hackney in East London. Shout out to anyone who's from East London. Neither of my parents went to university, let alone med school or Oxbridge. I went to a state comp while I was on free school meals, and I was always that kid who kind of had potential, whatever that means. And so I've been through it. I've been where you are now, applying, scared, nervous, to doing the application process, to getting in, doing the medical degree, and then being on the other side of being a part of admissions and interviewing and helping that process of people get in. So I've really done kind of the full circle of not only doing it myself, but also being on the other side of the couch and helping you guys on the other side. So what is the Cambridge interview then? Is what actually loads of people are asking and worried about. It seems like this mystery, this enigma. If any of you keep up with the kind of soul-crushing news, not the fact that the news is already soul-crushing anyway, you will see some articles like this. And these were pulled from when I was running talks and running interviews, and these articles come up again and again and again, that straight A-star students, perfect students are applying and they are getting rejected. And it's not enough. You have to be insurmountably perfect to get into Cambridge. They have these crazy interviews that are so hard to get through and no one gets in. It's just impossible. Seems weird because every year people do get in. And so I kind of took that mentality of it feels like fear mongering, but every year people get in and do the course and get accepted onto the course. And so clearly it's not impossible, but there's got to be something else to it. Now, when people go into the interview process, they think of this. They think of the fear of being lined up by a panel and being rinsed and kind of academically slaughtered publicly. That is the fear that people have. But I'm going to spend most of my session kind of dispelling that and talking through what are we actually doing in an interview and why do we find it so important? Why are people so scared of it? But why is it so useful in our determination of admissions into Cambridge or into med school as a whole? Because medicine across the board is largely interview based. So instead of fearing about what they are trying to trick you with, let's look at what they are trying to accomplish. So A Cambridge interview is normally centered in a specific college that you apply to, and you will have 2 to 3 interviews. Within those interviews, there will be 2 to 3 interviewers who will be asking you a series of questions. Each interview is about 20 to 30 minutes each, and it will go by in a flash. And I will say that it is often, I say 1 to 3, largely it is 2 or more, because we want to get multiple opinions about you, even within the same interview. All right. What I will say, and this might sound very cheesy, is that the Cambridge interview process is an opportunity for you to demonstrate who you are. I won't lie. Oxford and Cambridge medical schools, we get some of the strongest applicants, not only in the country, but across the world. And it seems really scary, but on paper, people can look very, very good. People aren't perfect. There are very, very few students who come in looking perfect. I want to clarify that now. So what you're hearing from previous speakers about, you know, when you're doing your BMATs or your GCSEs or your personal statement, like no one thing is going to see it. That's very true, because very rarely is someone amazing across the board. Largely, people will stumble at 1 or 2, and that's to be expected. What the interview does is that it looks at these people who look very, very similar on paper and gives you an opportunity to demonstrate who you are, how you think, how you learn. And that is what we are trying to gather, the information we're trying to gather about you as a potential applicant, because we're trying to find out about you. We're trying to find out about you as a person, because you are not a paper application with a series of grades and a personal statement and a BMAT score. You are so much more than that individually. And so we had to take all of these things into consideration. And I will say, on the other side of the table, as an interviewer, we look at everything, absolutely everything. But let's focus on what the interview does, right? So this is a chance for you to come in and meet some of the professors who will likely be teaching you. So they have an invested interest. They're not here to ring you up because they're doing it for fun. These people will be your future supervisors, professors, lecturers. So they are going to have you as a student next year. And so they want good students. They want you to do well. And that's the thing I really want to emphasize here, is that interviews do not try to trip you up. We really, really want you to make the decision easy for us. Oh my God, if only I could get an interviewee who comes in and absolutely blows us away, I am happy, because then I'll say easy decision. Easy decision to put you in. But by the nature of interviews, it's very, very hard to impress. But that allows for it to be a level playing field. So a lot of you are currently thinking, what kinds of questions are going to come up? And some of you may be attending the session with a pen and paper in hand, more likely your phone or a tablet or your laptop, and you want me to list off an amount of interview questions that you can go away and prepare for. I'm going to say right now, I am not going to do that. The reason I'm not going to do that is because it is impossible for me to give you a list of questions that is representative of every interview that occurs in Cambridge. We have thousands of applicants that apply to Cambridge medicine every year. We have 31 colleges, the large majority of which take in medicine. Each college will have not just the interviewers who will interview you, but interviewers that will interview other students. So maybe 10, 12, 15 interviewers per college. Each of those interviewers will have a series of questions. Each of those interviewers will ask different questions each time as well. So there's a crazy list of interview questions, and you're going to hear some crazy ones that come up in the news and in books. There's no point in me going through a list of questions. What I'd rather do is I would rather sit here and tell you the styles of questions that can come up. And these styles of questions is what's going to form the basis of the vast majority of not only your interview questions at Cambridge, but across the board. So what kind of question could come up, and how would you go about tackling it? So the first one is a very obvious one, which is medicine as a profession. Unlike most academic subjects which you just study directly into a job. So the only other ones are like veterinary medicine, law, architecture. These are unique in the fact that it directly links to you is how much do you know about medicine as a profession? These jobs may range from what kind of work experience you did and what did you learn from it? What are the pros and cons of being a doctor? Why did you choose medicine and not nursing? There's lots of questions that would fit into this category. But the reason why we ask it is because we want to know whether you actually want to do this job. It's great if you want to study medicine academically. Loads of people do, but then you could do biomedical sciences. Why specifically medicine as a job? Now, medicine as a job does require you to know and be passionate about academic medicine as a science, but also about the job at the end of it. It would be great if you understand all the science, but if you don't understand what a day-to-day looks like for a GP or for a surgeon or for any kind of doctor, if you can sit in front of me and you don't understand what the drawbacks of being a doctor is, if you can't explain what are the differences between being a doctor, a physiotherapist, and a nurse, then it puts me into question of, do you know that there's a job at the end of this? Are you going to be fit for it? So how do you get better at these questions? Well, actually, it's very easy and very selfish in the fact that all you have to do is go figure out if you want to be a doctor. And you do that by asking these questions, finding out more about the job, doing work experience, reading up online, talking to friends, talking to your teachers, trying to learn more about the profession as a whole. And so that's going to put you in good stead for kind of these styles of questions. Next is very specific to Cambridge because we really emphasize this section, but this also comes up in other medical schools, is science and academia. So again, it is a blend as a career, a blend of your aptitude and your passion for science and your ability to want to do the job. But specifically in Cambridge, something that is very unique to Cambridge is the fact that we really want to check your scientific aptitude. We want to make doctors who have a very deep understanding of the core science behind medicine. That's sort of the hallmark of a Cambridge medical degree. We aren't the kind of doctors who looks at someone with tuberculosis and has memorized the treatment for tuberculosis. We are the kind of doctors that have learned the basic lung physiology, why the lung does what it does, what happens when the lung gets ill, what happens in TB, why is it a specific kind of bacteria that acts in its way, how have we developed these kinds of medications, and thus the medications to give for TB. And so this is a very roundabout way to go about it, but actually gives you a very deep understanding not only of the science that we perform now, but also the science that can be achieved in the future. And so for this, you're going to be asked your science kind of academic questions. I will say that this is where I'll spend the majority of my time talking because this is the most unique to Cambridge, that we are not trying to trip you up, but we are going to ask you questions that you will get wrong. Science questions are not a test of your scientific knowledge. If we wanted to know how much science you know, we'll just make you do A-levels. We'll just give you a written exam. It'll be much cheaper for us to print out a piece of paper, let you go away, write on it, answer the questions, bring it back to us. That's not what we're doing. We're looking for what is your scientific aptitude. And so for that, we will specifically be asking you questions you do not know. That is a good thing, because what that means is that you cannot memorize the answer, and it gives a level playing field to every single student. So the interesting thing then becomes, okay, if we give every single student a question that they do not know the answer to, how long does it take them to figure out the answer? If we give them hints, if we guide them through their thinking, how long will that take? Because that is a show of how quickly you can learn something new. If we give you something we've never seen before, but is vaguely based on something you've seen. So an example might be if we ask you to discuss proteasomes in cellular biology, you might have no idea what proteasomes are, but you know what a cell is. You know the kind of stuff that happens in a cell. So you can start from there and think, okay, then if I get a couple of hints about what it does, would I then figure out how it's used medically or how it's used in the scientific field? These questions are some of the hardest questions that you will get in this interview, but it's not meant to trick you or for us to laugh at you for getting questions wrong. We really want you to work through these problems and succeed at the end of it. We want you to get to the answer. So I would say that, firstly, my advice is know the science that you know. So you can't know everything, but the things that you say you know, If you, in your personal statement, you say, I have a real passion for viruses and virology due to the recent pandemic, you should know the difference between a virus and a bacteria. You should know why the COVID pandemic was so widespread. You should know the kinds of methods that viruses use to infect and why they're so dangerous. And so if you're going to tell us that you know something, make sure you know it. You'd be surprised at the amount of people who would say something in their personal statement. We ask them about it and they're like, ooh, I have no idea what you're talking about. So know what you know. And when it gets to the interviews, be prepared to be wrong and be prepared to be challenged, but engage in it. Start talking out loud, start going through your thinking process and really think about, okay, what if I just start saying things that I know, is any of it going to link to the answer? Maybe I will just need to show my working. And usually you will say something that is vaguely on the right lines, and maybe the professor might nudge you to the right way or not and say, okay, interesting, let's explore that. Or, okay, you say this, why is this true and not false? Why do you know that works? And so know the science you know, and just be ready to engage in what is a difficult conversation. And at the end of the day, it can be kind of weirdly fun to be able to talk to a world-leading expert about something they feel super passionate about and that you're hopefully interested in. The last broad brush category that has come up, which now more than ever is important, is ethics and public health. And so medicine does not happen in a vacuum, and it's not solely an academic endeavor. There is so much complexity that comes to medicine. Issues about life and death, issues about autonomy, issues about your human rights, issues about safety. And so you should be aware that going into being a doctor is not just a textbook subject. You are dealing with people. And so they may or may not ask you an ethics questions, such as, would you rather, if you were given a set amount of money, would you rather have 100 hip replacements or 1 congenital heart replacement for a baby? There is no right answer to these ethical questions. There is no perfect way to address them or answer them. But what I will say is that there are frameworks for you to begin to tackle the ethics. Do a little bit of reading on what some ethical principles are, some of the basics of ethics. But really, this should be something that's interesting and fun to you, because going into medicine, this is kind of part of the job, part of the complexities, but some of the interest of medicine. In very much a related topic, the same goes for public health. And so especially now with COVID and with the pandemic and now with monkeypox and now with the different variants, public health more and more is becoming a discussion of, okay, it's not about us innovating medicine, it's about us trying to give the most people the best amount of healthcare they can. Again, we do not expect you to be public health experts, but if you come into our interview session and you don't know what COVID is, or you don't know what the benefit of vaccines are, or you don't understand what certain audits and targets are made within the UK NHS scheme, then we're kind of wondering, do you read up about medicine? Do you find it interesting outside of the school? And so for my advice for this section, just get stuck in. There is no perfect book to read. So many students ask me, what book do I start reading? Where should I start with resources? And my advice is, honestly, just start. Literally anywhere. You could Google medicine ethics, and reading whatever comes up is a start. Because I'm not worried about whether you read a book or not. I'm worried if you started reading or not. So these are the 3 major categories. But at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve with these interviews that we don't achieve with the rest of your paper applications? I will say that your interview, like everything else, is one factor that comes into play with what we decide. Having said that, a lot of colleges, not every college, but a lot of colleges have your paper application and your interview score equal. And so your interview is really what distinguishes some people. Now, I'm not saying that you should worry the most about your interview. I'm not saying that you should panic about it, but I'm saying that this is the chance for you to differentiate yourself and kind of stand out. I don't need you to come in perfect. I need you to come in as a student that we'd want to teach. So what we're looking for when we're looking at people coming in, I say we look at 3 major things for new applicants. One is academic ability. I can't get around it. You have to be smart at science. You have to be good and knowledgeable in science. This is something that we can check with your GCSEs, with your A-levels, with your BMAT. So this is something that we kind of have to have. You need to have a baseline scientific knowledge. But moreover, we need to know what your potential is. And this is where your interview comes in. And we're looking at how quickly can you pick up new stuff. And then unique to Cambridge is teachability, is whether you will thrive in this specific academic teaching style. We have seen so many people who come in who are bright and who are smart and who are going to be really, really good doctors, but the way that they engage in the interviews, we just know that Cambridge as a med school is not going to be helpful for them. They're going to hate the process. They don't like to learn every single basis and then come to an answer. They are very fast learners, but they might not be the best fit for Cambridge Med School. And we see so many people like that who are, you're going to be a great doctor, but you're just not going to enjoy the Cambridge medical program. So I'll move on to a little bit about, as someone who works in admissions and access, I get asked a lot of questions, and I am going to leave a bit of time for questions at the end. I'm also going to stick around for the 15-minute break. If anyone has any further questions, you're welcome to obviously just do your break, but I will be around for a little bit if you have any specific questions to me as an interviewer, as a supervisor, or as an alumni student. But I'm just going to give you broadly what I get, and I get this range. So how much do doctors get paid? Why did you go into medicine? What's a typical day for a doctor? Or what is your BMAT score? What GCSEs did you do? How many A-levels did you do? How much work experience did you do? And I would say that these questions largely fall into two camps. So they are largely either questions of, do I want to do this? Which is the left-hand column. So what's it like being a med student? What's it like being a doctor? You're really asking, is this for me? And then on the right-hand side, you're looking at, how do I get there? So these questions are, all right, I now know that I want to do it. So how do I get to your position? How do I get to where you are? And I will say that when you're thinking about these two groups of questions, they largely feed into each other. You wanting to do medicine is going to naturally fill into the things that you want to do to get there. So what I mean by that is that if you want to be a doctor, you're going to go and get some work experience. And then people who have work experience will more naturally get into medicine. If you're keen to be a doctor, you probably want to read up more about sciences. So you probably picked science A-levels and you probably studied for your BMATs. And so the process of going between, do I want to do this and how do I get there, are very interlinked. And I will say that my biggest piece of advice is, can you provide the evidence for this? Can you provide the evidence that you did this thinking process? Do I want to do medicine and how do I get in? And so fundamentally, what do we look for as interviewers, as people who are assessing your applications? We want proof of someone who wants to and is able to do what they applied for. So in this scenario, I want proof that you want to do medicine at Cambridge, and I want proof that it's something that you're able to do. And the more proof that you can provide of any kind, the better. So some small bits of advice from me as someone who's been on the other side. Beforehand, do your research, know what's coming up. Attending this session already is a big step forward for you preparing for your next few months. Get nerdy about the science that you're interested in, the things that you look up, preparing for your BMATs, writing your personal statement. Get excited about the kinds of medicine and science out there. And if you're not excited about that medicine, then maybe that's a correct answer and you shouldn't be applying for this course. And so hopefully you find it exciting. And if you don't, that's not a bad thing. You've probably dodged a bullet. Last thing is just practice. I will say that there is no way to practice specific answers because you don't know if these questions are going to come up. But I will say practice just talking academically with someone senior to you. So have a practice of talking to your teachers or your parents or guardians or even your friends. Try practice talking about science, about medicine, about ethics, just to get it under your skin. During the interview itself, it's okay to be nervous. Everyone is. Everyone is nerve-wracked. Everyone comes in shaking, and we are trying to get the best out of you because we would hate it if you're an amazing student, but you're just too nervous. So we are rooting for you. So don't think that's a bad thing to be nervous. We want you to succeed. And when it comes to tackling the questions, be creative, be brave, try new ideas, just start talking. And if you say something wrong, they'll just say, that's wrong, try something else. And you just try something else. Just keep trying, because that at the end of the day is how you learn and how you become the academic doctor that you'd hopefully like to be. So finally, that's pretty much everything that I have to say. Huge best of luck. We are sitting here and rooting for you, and we look at everything. We do genuinely look at everything in context as well. So if we know what school you went to, we know the average grade of your school, we know if you've been in care, if you've had free school meals, we know if we know a lot of information about where you come from and your background, and we put that all into context. If you are getting straight A's in a school that averages C's, that looks very different to someone who gets getting A's and in a school that averages A stars. We know that. We try to look at everything as much as possible, but really, I wish you the best of luck. And if you guys have any questions, now would be a good time. I also have my social media, and so if any of you would want to drop me a question, I would say that I try really hard to keep a bit of a distance between incoming students and what advice I give, but sometimes I do give advice on there that I would feel that is beneficial for you guys. And so that's kind of it. I think I've just managed to finish in time. I have a few minutes dedicated specifically to this talk, and then I'll be around also for the next 15 minutes if you're interested. And so I will stop sharing. And if you guys have any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Taha. So we do have a couple of questions. So I don't know if you necessarily have any experience with this specifically, because it's only happened in the last 2 years. But do you have any sort of particular tips for online interviews as opposed to in person?
Ooh, the connection just cut out for a bit for that question. Can you ask that again? Sorry.
Yeah. So obviously in the last 2 years with COVID and the pandemic, interviews have been online. I'm not sure if they're going to be online this year or not. But some people were asking whether or not, or what type of preparation do you think might be different for an online interview as opposed to perhaps an in-person?
I would say that largely it will be the same. You might save some time and some money from traveling. There are pros of doing in person in the fact that you get to meet some of the students and kind of meet the professors in person, but also it's sometimes a privilege to get out these interviews. And so online has really provided a platform for literally anyone to be able to interview. I will say prepare the same way. The only thing I would add is make sure that your setup is good. And so make sure that you are well lit, make sure that your laptop is raised so we can see you, make sure that you're still dressed in whatever makes you feel comfortable. There is no need to wear a suit per se, but we just want you to feel comfortable for the interview. A lot of people choose either their school uniform or a suit or business attire because they feel the most kind of professional-esque. But I will say, just at least make sure that your home setup is good. Don't forget that.
There's another question in terms of how I'll sort of wrap two questions up together. But how much sort of current affairs do you need to know of? And related to that question, obviously I don't know how connected you are to the sphere at the moment, but somebody asked, how do you feel about the junior doctor pay crisis and protests and things like that? I know that's a very heated question, I think, but probably not a lot of time to answer it.
That's a big answer. You have a big answer. I will say that the things that we expect you to know in terms of current affairs are the obvious things. And so in some regards, we might ask you the question, what piece of medical current affairs are you reading or looking into? So we give that to you. You can decide what topic to pick, but we should expect you to know about junior doctors' strikes and crises and the kind of lack of pay and support, any changes to any of the training systems. We know you maybe a bit. We definitely expect you to know about COVID. And it's just, we would like you to have some form of engagement and knowledge about it, and also have a nuanced view of, okay, not what the news articles are peddling out, but what is the general opinion of doctors? And you can just, on your work experience, ask a doctor, and that's it. And there you've prepared for your answer. Ask a doctor of like, how do you feel about how we've managed COVID? Or how do you feel about the current crisis? Or like, what's going on with that? And so we don't expect you to be perfect and well-read on everything. We kind of expect the kind of standard that we would think someone interested in medicine would have.
Yeah, and another question I think is, as a doctor, do you feel like you have enough time to sort of do your hobbies, see friends and family in adequate amount? I get that that's probably a stereotype for a lot of doctors, and probably something that I can't answer yet.
Yeah, I would say that being a doctor is so widely varied that there are answers that stretch the full spectrum. And so what I would say is that I will say that for me, I had time to still see my friends, to still keep up. I was a professional ballroom dancer for a little bit, and I still did that whilst I was a doctor for the first 2 years. And it's just about time management and prioritizing. And you've been doing that in preparation for your A levels, what you'll be doing it through med school. It's the same as your career. I will say that it is hard. You are going to be making sacrifices. There are birthday parties that I've missed. There are Christmases that I've missed. But you know that going in. But if it's important to you, someone who are work could have gone home, and some people would get like go to the gym. People have different priorities, and so it will be a balance you'll be doing for the rest of your life, but it's not impossible at all.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Ha. So as Dr. Ha said, he'll be around for the next couple minutes. So if you have any specific questions to him, just pop them into the chat and directly message him. Obviously, Dr. Ha is a busy doctor, so obviously he can't answer every single question under the sun, but hopefully he'll be able to answer some of the questions that you guys have. So thank you so much, Dr. Ha, for being able to talk to us and answer some of our questions.
Amazing, thank you. I'll be, if it's okay with you, Mackie, I see things coming into my chat, and so I don't know if you receive a different set of questions, but I'm happy, you can take a break and I'm happy to sit here and just build.
Yeah, that's completely fine, yeah.
Cool, all right. So anyone who's staying around for the chat, feel free to just drop me a message and I'll go through them. Firstly, Lucia, if you get accepted into Cambridge without a scholarship, is there financial support available for those who can't afford the cost? Absolutely, there is. Each college has a unique system of how they finance, and there's a university-wide way to finance. So I got the Cambridge University scholarship and the St. John's College scholarship as well. I actually chose St. John's College because it had the highest number of scholarships, and I was broke as a 17-year-old. None of my parents couldn't support me. They gave me all of the love and support, but they're like, we cannot give you money because we don't have it. And so it was really important to me to be in a college that has that financial support. And so something to look into when you're looking at colleges. Amani, thank you so much for coming and staying for our talk. May, are we allowed to use pen and paper to explain scientific questions during the interview? Yes, absolutely. In one of my interviews, I sat down and there was a stack of paper and pen in front of me. They asked me a question. I stuttered a little bit, but I'm very visual. I draw and I sketch and I do a lot of diagrams. So I just kind of looked at it as a crutch and was like, can I sketch it out for you? And the professors there were like, hey, if that's how you want to learn and how you want to provide your information, great. And so absolutely able to do that. That is something that you can do. Hartim, what would you recommend to do at the start of year 12? It's a big year for you guys. It really, really is. I would say that now is the time for you to kind of buckle down and really focus on priming your application. And I'm not saying that there's any perfect thing to do, but make sure that each day you're cognizant of what is to be done. Now, I don't expect you to do everything every day, but in my head, I was like, I'm prepping for BMAT on these days. I'm revising for my A levels on these days. I'm having a day off on this day. Having a plan of action at all, no matter what the plan is a big step forwards than kind of flailing. And so it's unique to you and what you want to do. But I would say to every year 12 student going in, just have a plan. I wanted to make sure that my personal statement was done before I started year 12. I wanted to make sure that I got UKCAT done before I started year 12, because I took really stupid A-levels. I took too many, and I was trying to really focus on those. And so just make sure you have a plan. By the way, if any of these questions don't fully answer your question, just drop back in and let me know. Nathan, I'm so sorry if I pronounce any of these names wrong. Do you have any, if you don't know what specific medical terms the interview said meant, can you ask them to say what it means? Absolutely. We don't want to ask you a question that you get wrong because of a technicality or because we used a word that you have not come across before. I assume everyone knows what apoptosis is, but you might not because of your A-level program. Absolutely fine. Clarification of the question, absolutely fine. What is the most rewarding thing about being a doctor? Oh, you guys. I would say that, especially during times of COVID, and especially compared to some of my colleagues, I am very basic and I like kind of instant gratification. And I'm not saying you'll be helping people every day because that's a very cheesy answer. But the best thing about being a doctor is that every day I will go in and I would have done something tangible. And so I have friends who are in consultancy or in research, and they go in and they spend 8 hours at work. And at the end of the day, they're like, I don't know what I did. Whereas for me, I can go home with my to-do list and I said, you know what, I booked that x-ray, I wrote that discharge letter, I organized this person's surgery, I managed to do this, I managed to do this. And even if it's draining, and even if it's tough, and even if I have a horrible day, I can look at that list and say, you know what, I did something today. This is proof, concrete proof that my job is doing something. And that was especially true during the pandemic when everyone felt so lost about what their job does, what are they doing in life. People, our generation more than ever, values job satisfaction. And I think that is a small thing that you can't take away from me as a doctor. Let's see. Dear Dr. Hart, Zach, dear Dr. Hart, please could you... I will say that someone's asking if I would read over personal statements. I don't, unfortunately, because if I did do that, all of you would send me your personal statement, and that is too much to read, and it is just my flavor. Your personal statement is yours. It's personal. You will have teachers who know you better, who will be able to answer these questions more appropriately than I can. And so I'm really sorry. I can give you some advice about personal statements, but I can't read them over. I'm so sorry. How would you recommend making scientific journals? Oh, gosh. Journals more accessible for learners at our stage. I would say that there are things that are pitched specifically for people at your level. So I would not recommend going and reading the recent Nature journal about virology. That is crazy hard. But like the BMJ student is aimed at students. And so it's a little bit more accessible. And you can give that a go of trying to read through things that are pitched towards your level. There are podcasts, more and more podcasts that are doing this. There are different kinds of journals that do this. So I would have a look at those. Mahika, I wanted to ask, oh gosh, the chat moves more than I can read the question. How important are your GCSE grades for your application? Are there specific GCSEs that they would expect when you apply? The minimum GCSE that we expect from you is to have 1 GCSE in maths, 2 GCSEs in science, and that's it. Oh, and English language, some kind of English to make sure that you kind of like can understand the English of the course. That is the minimum. I would say that different colleges, once again, look at GCSEs very differently. Some people hold them very highly because it is an exam that you have done and achieved. So it's a show of your aptitude at doing scientific exams. But I also know many people who bloomed after GCSE. They only really knew that they wanted to do medicine when they were in their first year of A-levels. And so some colleges will look at it differently. Again, we take it into context of everything else. You have great GCSEs, great. That's a good pillar so that if you kind of have poor A-level predictions or poor BMAT score, we know that you're good at exams. Or if you have bad GCSEs, but then maybe you have really good A-level predictions, we know that your teachers are like, look, this person really picked up after GCSEs. So no specific requirements. I wasn't taught all of the GCSE content due to COVID. Will this be a disadvantage at interview? I will say that the major disadvantage it will be mostly at is for your BMATs, because your BMATs expect some level of GCSE knowledge for the science section of biology, chemistry, physics, and maths. And so I just made sure that I was reviewing the stuff on my own. It sucks that you weren't taught all of the GCSE content. It's really rough. Having said that, if you're interested in this course, you might pick up a GCSE physics book and just flip through it and try and teach it yourself, because kind of looking back, you might say, you know what, I could have just learned this on my own. And so would it be a disadvantage at interview? Not massively, but it might be a disadvantage at BMAT, and there's no harm in you just reading up on sciences in general. Will virtual work experience be different from in-person experience in interview? Will you be marked down for that? No, absolutely not. You will not be marked down for virtual interview, virtual work experience, and you won't be marked down for if you don't have access to certain kinds of work experience. People ask, how much work experience should I have? My answer, you should do as much work experience as it takes for you to understand medicine as a career. How much that is up to you. I've seen people do 4 days of it amazingly. I've seen people do 2 months of it terribly. So really is what you make of it. Can we get your phone number? No, I'm really sorry. Best thing to do is maybe go for social media, like public social media, because that's more public than private. Are there opportunities at Cambridge for studying abroad and seeing other healthcare systems? Yes. I made sure that whilst I was at Cambridge, I took as much money from Cambridge as I could and went traveling. So I went and did an art tour of Greece and Italy, paid for by Cambridge. I did a summer project in New York, looking at engineering, bioengineering, paid for by Cambridge. Every Cambridge student has access to an elective, which is 8 weeks paid for, usually like supported by the college for you to go away. I went to Thailand and Australia to do my elective. Again, another reason why I picked John's, because they had a huge fund for electives. So I was like, great, give me the free money and let me go and travel. So absolutely, there are travel opportunities. Applying as a graduate, wondering if my A-levels BBB, but with a first class would be disadvantage for me applying, as I realized BMAT isn't considered, but I had extenuating circumstances during A-levels. Yes, Zunira, we have lots of graduate students who come in with maybe not the most appropriate A-level scores, but have a really good scientific record because of their degree. Some choose to then go back and redo biology and chemistry A-level just to prove themselves, but we have people coming in with lower scores. I will say though that the graduate track is competitive. So even though it's not necessarily a disadvantage, you are up against a very competitive pool. There are just fewer spots for the people applying. And so I would say that, you know, if there are extenuating circumstances, absolutely we'll take that into consideration. But really, it's a tough way to apply, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, because like I said, someone has to get in. This is a great question. Saina, do you feel like being a person of color in medicine changes your experience to be slightly different? Yes, it does. And I would be lying if it doesn't. I would say that if you are white, if you are a person of color, if you are a model minority or underrepresented in medicine, what that means is that there are some minorities that are people of color that actually medicine takes a lot of. Medicine takes a lot of Indian and East Asian and Chinese students. That doesn't mean that it's better for Asians. It just means that it's different and you will have a different experience. Everyone, every single one of you will know that your race, your gender will come into play about how you navigate medicine. And that is a fact, but it's something that you have to recognize and work with. There are some things that I can achieve more by being a person of color who knows more about certain cultures, by being someone who's LGBT and queer and knows a lot about queer medicine that other people don't. So it is different, but you should utilize your differences, be ready to tackle them and be ready to fight for them as well. Be an advocate for people of color. It is different. I won't lie that it's not, but it doesn't stop you from being a great doctor. It doesn't stop you from getting in at all. Is it possible to get into Cambridge with A stars and A's for A-level grade, specifically A in chemistry? Such a specific example that it really depends on the rest of your application and who's looking at it. If everything about your application is perfect, but that, sure. If your application had lots of weak points already, then it's hard to kind of make up for it if you don't have the right grades. We are looking at now 2 A stars and an A is tough. And so we're getting a more and more competitive field. You guys are getting better and better, and it's hard. I know it's hard, but it's just we try and do our best to split hairs. What kind of GCSE results are best to aim for? I've answered this as well, of really just as well as you can. And at this point, you've already done them, so there's no point worrying about them. How long should you spend preparing for your interview? Same as how long you should spend preparing for your BMAT or for your UKCAT. It's such a hard question. I would say until you feel comfortable talking about these topics, that is how long you should take. How do you know which college to choose, as there are so many different colleges in Cambridge? It's tough. And to be honest, most colleges are more similar than they are different. I would say go, see them in person, see what they're like, see if you like the experience of it. I just found John's and really enjoyed it and kind of picked it because it was pretty and it had a lot of money to give people from low income ones. Basically, equally possible to get into medicine, no matter the college you apply to, because of the pooling process. So we make that even across the board. Do you recommend get an overall understanding of the NHS structure and GMC guidelines that can be understood by a student? If that's interesting to you, I would say that having some knowledge of what the NHS is super helpful. I don't expect you to know the full political infrastructure of it, but knowing that it exists, how it relates to the GMC is just interesting. It's interesting because it will affect you in your life anyway. Oh my God. If I want to start revising for that, it keeps coming. If I want to start revising for BMATs, where do I start? Revise your GCSEs, revise your A-levels, have a look at the book. You don't need to buy it. I got my school library together, and just review that, do past papers.
Should we wrap up about here,
Also,
Dr. Ha?
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't want to bleed into the next person. So thank you for all of the questions. I may be able to come back. I don't know if the student panel, if you want me there or not, you can let me know. I can drop in there if people have specific questions to me. A lot of these questions can be fielded also by our like amazing team at CamWAMS. But if you guys do get any specific questions to me as an interviewer or supervisor, then I might drop back in for that.